Hello. Good afternoon, or whatever time of day you are watching this. I'm SarahPoet, and I'm going to tell you about a conversation I was having with a friend, an acquaintance, the other day, and I thought you might find it interesting as well. So, my friend is a retired psychotherapist. So, he has been analyzing people's actions and behaviors and thoughts for decades and trained as a psychotherapist, does psychological evaluations, did a lot of talk therapy with his clients over the years. And he was asking me if I had ever heard of this business about somatics and therapy. And I was like, well, goodness me, yes, I have. Let's talk about that. And he was very interested in this topic that was new to him because when he had trained in psychotherapy, there was no mention of somatics and what was going on in the body as far as the trauma goes. So, this is relatively new to the scene in the past couple of decades. Trauma was kind of a, taboo topic for a long time. And then the legitimate research started coming forward like 80s, 90s, right? So we had generations upon generations of people in the industrialized world that were carrying significant trauma in the body and not really knowing quite how to deal with it because our therapy only dealt with the mind. What I find fascinating is that these folks were also interested in doing things like partnering and having relationships and having children and raising children. I'm really interested in the health of our relations, our partnerships, how we interact with one another. And so I was telling him what I knew about somatics, which is quite a bit from my own experience healing, trauma in my own body, and then really studying it quite extensively in mindfulness programs, trauma-informed educational programs. And then I said to him, do you know, this is the basis of the work that I do with couples. And he said, really? Tell me more. So this is what I thought you might like to know about as well. So the head, the mind, cannot analyze everything that the body is holding. It can't possibly. And what we know about trauma, and you can read Peter Levine and Bessar van der Kolk and others on the topic of trauma, but what we know is that our body and our mind actually protect us from having to know the whole truth of our traumas. And so the traumas live in the body, but not necessarily at the front of the mind, not necessarily in the prefrontal cortex. We can't access all of the stories for all of the emotions that we're holding. And so we might have an experience where we're, dating someone or in even a long-term relationship, and we feel a sense of self-protection or a sense of closure, and we feel that in our bodies, and it might feel like fear, it might feel like a stomach clenching, it might feel like an urge to pull away. Hello, welcome, thanks for watching. And so those are trauma responses that are living in the soma of the body. It's living in the physicality of the body. And so I recognized over time when I was becoming wise to these things that I had a lot of those tendencies. I also really recognized that I was really yearning for, close connection and relationship, as I think we all do, pretty much all of us do. People want to feel connected, we want to feel belonging, and so we yearn for that. And these traumas sometimes that we don't even know, like where they came from or the story behind them, but we know that our body holds something, it can really interfere with our connection and our ability to connect. And so after learning about this for quite some time and also kind of mapping the experience of my own body, what I did was to create my couples coaching. I call it conscious relating, but it's a trauma informed couples coaching where I actually teach the couples how to presence with the other's body when there is a trauma response going on. So, what do couples usually do when there's like a problem or a conflict in their relationship? They go to talk therapy. And as a lot of us know, I mean, I've been married and divorced once. And so, as a lot of us know, when you go to talk therapy, you don't quite get to the bottom of it. And I think that this is because the trauma is really what's underlying is not in the mind. You know, it's in the deep psyche and it's in the body. And so my couples coaching, I took everything I had learned from, trauma informed care and how to get along with one another and masculine feminine, and I created an opportunity for couples to come together in a coaching model. So it's not therapy. I'm not a therapist. I actually, in case anyone's wondering, I have 2 master's degrees in education and educational leadership and studied mindfulness and trauma informed care really extensively in that time. Again, as I was living it and tracking it in my own female body, in my own relationships, and in my own, spiritual awakening and feminine masculine reclamation. So I put all of these things together. So by now I'm blowing my friend, the psychotherapist's mind, because he's kind of intrigued by my work with feminine masculine. But this is all new, right? Because these are new times on the planet. So I chose to innovate so that we can have quite a significant experience of connection when we meet one another almost in a trauma-informed way. But we actually get to do that through embodied intimacy. So what does this look like? So for example, I'll just go with something that a lot of people can relate to. So a woman is carrying, a trauma related to masculine or a man in her body, in her being. And, let's say there was a transgression against her where someone didn't have consent to, take from her body as they did. And so she has a trauma around, be it a rape or something just, more common or something that feels like a transgression but may not be as deeply significant as rape. It's the same in the body. And so she may shield and close, maybe in the chest, maybe in the belly. Like we usually protect our vital organs when we have a trauma response because this is where we're afraid of dying, quite frankly. And so, from like the neck to a lot of women have like voice stuff, right? So how to speak up for your needs, speak up around consent, all of that is involved in what I'm talking about. And so kind of like from the neck down is where we protect. And from the neck up is where, the psychotherapy and the therapy and the talk therapy wants you to process these things about connection. Well, it's from the neck down where we are actually experiencing the somatic contraction of closure and self-protection. And so let's just say in this example that this woman is particularly guarding of like her belly and her intestinal area and everything downwards from that. And so when she goes to partner or like make love to a partner, there's going to be a closure, but what intimacy, what the two humans are wanting is openness. is connection, is like, this flowering, gorgeous, uninhibited openness. And she may not be able to do that. There's a lot of, I think, imposed spiritual shame on women right now, by the way, for, if she can't do that, if she can't just open. And that is something I have a strong opinion about. It's just not okay to shame women, or for women, for you to pressure yourselves with that. I've experienced this myself. It's like, well, why can't you just like be open? Well, because the trauma in the body really has to be met and presenced with. So if they start to analyze this, her system might go into more contraction because it's not safe to analyze. Or, he might, if it's a male partner, he might start to have like, well, why can't I please you? Why won't you open for me? Oh, you're so rigid. All this relational conflict can actually come in and get exacerbated when at the root of it is this old trauma that really is just yearning to be met. So that's really a point I want to bring across here. The trauma is yearning to be met. It doesn't have to be, focused on perpetually. It doesn't have to be like she's not a, victim forever. I have a weed eater coming around my window outside, so I'm going to just plug this in so I can concentrate a little bit better. But, it's not like she's taking the stance of forever victimized. I'm not at all advocating for it, at all. But whatever the trauma, whatever the gender, whatever the reason, you don't even have to know it. It can just be like the felt sense in the body. It's like where we want to close or where we want to run. These are the places that we actually just want to stay and have ourselves be met. And so when two humans, two partners, don't take that personally, and they're able to stay in presence, and this is what I teach to couples, and we work together over 12 weeks, and there is talking and there is coaching, and then there is these experiments in human connection where I'm teaching them how to presence with the other and with the body and the soma of the other. And so if there's a place that feels, guarded, or a place that feels like you want to run away, these are the places where you don't talk about it at first. Like you don't need to talk it to death, right? Because that's infuriating. It doesn't work, and it often causes more disconnection, I find, actually, in my clients, rather than more connection. Talking it to death for hours and hours is maddening, and it's unnecessary, because what ultimately wants to happen is that the body wants to be met. And so I can teach you these things. I'm looking at my notes. This is also the basis for attachment theory, which is another thing that we like to learn about, because it gives us a lot of information about like, oh, I go toward, but they go away, right? And then there are names for those attachment theories. I don't really talk about attachment theory. I talk about the, wanting to go toward or wanting to go away. And these are sensations, and these are energetics. And when we understand this about ourselves and our partners, then we can learn what to do about it. So every single one of us wants connection, wants, deeper intimacy. And I know a lot of you who will be watching this content, you want spiritual union, you want sacred union, you want union that is unified, from the bodies to the soul, to the heart, to God, right? Like that's what some of us are going for. And so we can't bypass the body. We can't spiritually bypass the body and say, oh, we're going to find our soulmate, our divine union partner, and, ignore the fact that we are coming out of, thousands of years of a dominator culture where, transgressions were made, where men were told to be strong and not be in touch with like their true and their authentic feelings, where all of us were encouraged to just be like from the neck up in the mind, rather than be embodied and learning the wisdom of this like sacred embodiment that we get to have. And so it's not, it can all be very complex if we want to like think about it and read all the books and spend years and years on it. And sometimes trauma healing takes that long to unwind. But you can learn the basics of how to presence with your partner in a way where, I took what I was learning in like Hakomi therapy and somatic experiencing and all of these different places. And I thought, well, I can teach couples to do this with and for one another. And then that heals relational trauma. So it's quite powerful, it's quite profound, and it can also be really fun to do some of these embodied intimacy experiments with your partner. It doesn't have to be like super heavy, oh, we're healing our trauma. It's like you get to just peacefully be with one another and presence in a way where you get to know one another so much more deeply than you currently do. To be quite blunt, I have worked with couples that could find a way to, rub body parts together and have sex, but they had a really hard time with just simple exercises around embodied intimacy. And that's very, very interesting to me. So just because there's like a frequency of, sex or penetration or orgasm even, doesn't mean that you're not bypassing a trauma response in the body. This is very sad to me to say, actually, because I think this is very, very common. I think a lot of people show up just wanting that love and wanting that connection and show up in the space of lovemaking and relationships and ignore the spaces that you're contracting, or the spaces that say, wait, I need a little bit more attention here before I feel really safe to move on. Or men are just forcing themselves to like penetrate when maybe their heart's not in it and they need a little bit more, they may need more presencing before feeling really come forward, right? It's not just women that have the trauma from the patriarchal dominator culture by any means. It can sometimes look different, but sometimes not. So a couple other notes I had here. What does trauma in relationships look like? Well, I already said it can be the self-protection. It can be going from like 0 to 10, like a big reactivity in partnership. A lot of like push-pull or pulling away, right? Or clinging. So there we have the attachment variation, right? So if there's that like, like really big pulling away or going toward, that is definitely a sign of trauma in the relationship. Escape behaviors, escape avoidance behaviors. So, drinking alcohol or shopping or, other kinds of escape behaviors. And then so you're not really getting to the intimacy of your life, like with yourself or with one another. But again, you might be like coming together and having sex, and that feels probably really crummy. Yeah, and then self-denial or denial of the other and abandonment of self or other. So I'm really kind of all about, lately, you'll be hearing me talk about it in many different places these days, really normalizing that we are bringing relational historic trauma to our current relationships. We are also very amazing beings who are moving toward sacred union, conscious relationships, relationships that are going to change the world with the potency and power of this union. And there are no couples that are going to come together without some kind of trauma still in the body, because these are the times that we're coming out of. Like, our bodies have the residual trauma from previous relationships and previous transgressions, emotional and otherwise. And so I am not about to spiritually bypass this and say that, trauma is a bad word or an unconscious word or something like that. I'm saying it is absolutely possible for two conscious people to come together and to actually, heal right alongside one another, move this trauma from the cells together, experience embodied intimacy together, and to stay without that push and pull of reactive or of the attachments. So if you are interested in learning more about working with me, you can go to sarahpoet.com/consciousrelating. And the work that we do together over the course of the 12 weeks of the couples coaching package is quite beautiful and quite, I would say, multifaceted, multidimensional in its approach, but it is trauma informed for sure. And we're going there in the name of conscious relationships and conscious love and evolutionary love. And so if I can be of service to you and your relationship, I will look forward to you scheduling a consultation. So much love to you, and thank you for watching. Feel free to share this video out into your world and your connections, and I will see you next time. Bye.